Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin and today I'm going to be sharing with you 4 thrift store makeovers. All of today's projects are quick and easy, and when I'm finished with each of them, I'll share with you how I've used them in my home decor. I'm hoping today's makeovers will give you some inspiration on how to use some of the items that you may have found while out thrifting yourself. So let's get started. Today's first project is this lovely magazine rack, which I fell in love with at the thrift store, and I cannot wait to make it fit a little better into my home decor. First things first, this item was screaming for some paint. The finish was very scratched and a little bit dated looking, so I picked a soft gray paint color which I already had on hand. This is by Pittsburgh Paints. It is their Grand Distinction line. It is a paint and primer in one combination, and it has a satin finish. I love this paint and I pick it up at Menards. So I gave the magazine rack 2 coats of the paint. Once the paint was dry, I took a piece of fine grit sandpaper and ran it along the edges. This adds a little bit of dimension and helps highlight all of the lovely details. Once the sanding was complete, I applied a clear top coat to the whole piece. My favorite top coat for painted surfaces is this water-based polyacrylic by Minwax in the clear satin finish. It is very easy to work with, it won't yellow over time, and it's easy cleanup with soap and water. For now, my newly spruced up magazine rack has a new home in the dining room. It fits perfectly underneath this desk and is going to work out beautifully to hold my growing collection of records. The next project today is this wood pedestal. I found it at the thrift store and thought it would be the perfect thing to add to displays to help elevate a few items. But first, it needs a new look. After giving the whole piece a very good sanding because it had some very thick lacquer on it, I decided to give it a coat of black paint. Today I'm using Apple Barrel's black acrylic paint. I gave the whole piece 2 coats of paint. Once the base paint had dried sufficiently, I followed up by adding a top coat of white. I'm using Americana Decor's Chalky finish in the color Lace. I applied a thin layer of the paint and then taking a paint scraper, I ran it along the edges and over the top of the piece to remove some of the top coat to reveal the bottom coat. You have to move a little fast with this technique because you want to be scraping off the paint while it's still a little damp. I'm using this paint scraper today, which I've had for years, but there are many different types out there. And then once I had the first layer done, I added another layer of paint, and then I went ahead and started scraping off more of the paint. And I just continued to add layers of paint and scraping off more paint until I got the look that I desired. Once all the paint scraping was done, I gave the whole thing a top coat. For this project, I'm using DecoArt's Dura Clear Ultra Matte Varnish, which is one of my favorites. It dries very fast and it has a nice clear matte finish, which I love. And here is what the pedestal looks like when it was finished, and I am loving the look. I decided to use it in my dining room. I layered it on top of a floral runner and a bamboo tray, and then on top of that I put a nice hydrangea bush and a cute little hotel bell. And then of course I had needed a little bit of sparkle, so I added these new votive candles that I found at the thrift store recently, and I think altogether it makes a very nice display for my dining room table. For today's third project, I'm going to be using this scrap of flour sack to make a wall hanging for my kitchen. The first thing I needed to do was to iron it nice and flat, which I did on my portable ironing board. Next, I cut a piece of plywood. This is 1-inch plywood to the size that I needed. I also went ahead and cut 2 pieces of batting to the correct size as well. I then took my flour sack and laid it over the top of both of these items and centered it as best that I could. I didn't have a whole lot of room to work with on the sides, but as you can see, I flipped it over just to double check that all of the pieces of fabric would reach to the back side before I started attaching anything. I did have to trim down the batting on the sides just so that the flour sack would wrap around to the back side. Once I knew everything was going to fit, I started on the top side and I pulled the fabric down as taut as I could and then used a staple gun and stapled the fabric to the board. And then I repeated the process on the bottom side. And then I flipped the whole thing back over just to make sure that we were looking good. And then I flipped it back over again and added staples along both sides of the board. I then used a pair of scissors to cut out the excess fabric on the ends before I attached the corners. I also trimmed the batting away from the corners just to make the fabric lay a little nicer. To attach the corners, I pinched the fabric together at the corner and then pulled the tail nice and taut towards the middle of the board and then used a simple staple to hold it in place. I repeated the process on all 4 corners and the project was complete. The back side of the flour sack that I used in the previous project had this graphic as well, which I wanted to save. I decided I would just simply frame it up, so I took one of the frames from my stash, gave it 2 coats of paint from the Americana Decor Chalky finish in the color Lace, and then I also gave it a coat of top coat, and I used the DecoArt's Dura Clear Ultra Matte Varnish once again on that. And then once the frame was ready to go, I gave the flour sack a nice ironing so it was nice and flat and wrinkle free. Then taking the back of the frame itself, I laid that down flat and then layered the flour sack on top of it, making sure that I centered it as best that I could. Then I took a pencil and marked all 4 sides, and then used a scissors to cut out the shape. I then took a piece of white cardstock and cut it the same size as the back of the frame, slipped that in behind the flour sack just so that it would give a nice white base instead of the brown base of the cardboard. And then I flipped the whole thing over and stuck it into the frame, and that is about it. Project complete after that. I hung my first flour sack project on the side of my cabinet in my kitchen. I just used some 3M command strips on the back side of it, and it sticks perfectly to the side of the cabinet, and I love how it looks up here. I think this is such a fun graphic, and I think it's a perfect addition to the kitchen. I added the framed flour sack to this display I already had going on in my kitchen, and I think it's a great addition to this space. My final project today is this cute little box which I found at the thrift store. You can see the color that it originally was back here. For some reason I didn't get a before picture for you guys, but I gave it a coat of paint the same color as the magazine rack. I went ahead then and distressed it, and now you can see I am adding a clear coat. I'm using the same clear coat that I used on the magazine rack as well. When everything had dried, I hung it on this little wall in my kitchen next to my front window. And then I added a few sprigs of greenery to it, which I think is super adorable. And it's like the perfect little accent for this little corner, and I am absolutely loving the look. Alright, my friends, that is going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. I do appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed today's video and the makeovers that I have shared with you today. If you did, please leave me a comment down below. Let me know which of these projects I did today was your favorite. If you're new to my channel, I sure would love it if you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. And of course, give this video a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. Bye now.